I always enjoyed the solitude of my small apartment in the heart of the city. The bustling streets below would quiet down at night, leaving me alone with my thoughts. But tonight was different. Tonight, the shadows seemed to dance in a sinister rhythm, and every creak and groan of the old building echoed like whispers of impending doom. As I settled onto my worn-out couch, the faint glow of the streetlights outside casting eerie shadows across the room, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I chalked it up to my overactive imagination, trying to dismiss the unease creeping into my mind. However, as the night wore on, the feeling only intensified. Every little sound sent shivers down my spine, and I found myself checking the locks on the doors and windows repeatedly. It was as if something malevolent lurked just beyond the edge of my perception, waiting for the right moment to strike. I tried to distract myself with a movie, the flickering light from the TV providing a false sense of security. But even the cheerful voices of the actors couldn't drown out the sense of dread that hung heavy in the air. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the apartment, causing me to jump in fright. My heart raced as I cautiously made my way to the window, peering out into the darkness below. There was nothing but the empty street, bathed in the sickly glow of the streetlights. I tried to convince myself that it was just a stray cat knocking over a trash can, or a gust of wind rattling the old building. But deep down, I knew it was something more sinister. As the hours dragged on, I became increasingly paranoid, jumping at every little sound and imagining all sorts of horrors lurking in the shadows. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, closing in around me with each passing moment. Desperate for some semblance of normalcy, I decided to make myself a cup of tea. But as I reached for the kettle, I froze in terror. Reflected in the shiny surface of the metal was the unmistakable silhouette of a figure standing behind me. My heart pounding in my chest, I slowly turned around, half expecting to come face to face with some unspeakable horror. But there was nothing there. Just the empty kitchen, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight streaming in through the window. I told myself that I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that something was terribly wrong. The feeling of being watched never left me, a constant presence lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. As the night wore on, I retreated to my bedroom, hoping that sleep would offer some respite from the creeping sense of dread. But even in the safety of my bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just as I was on the verge of drifting off, a sudden noise jolted me awake. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the silent apartment. My heart raced as I strained to listen, the sound growing louder with each passing moment. With trembling hands, I reached for the baseball bat I kept by my bedside, my knuckles turning white as I gripped it tightly. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee from whatever nightmare awaited me in the darkness. But I couldn't bring myself to move, rooted to the spot by a paralyzing fear. The footsteps drew closer and closer, until they were right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, my entire body tensed for the inevitable confrontation. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the pounding of my own heart. For what felt like an eternity, I waited. My muscles coiled like a spring, ready to lash out at the first sign of danger. But nothing came. No sound, no movement, just the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing down on me from all sides. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it any longer, a voice broke the silence, sending a chill down my spine. "Hello, my dear. Did you miss me?" The voice was soft, almost musical, but there was something undeniably sinister about it. It was a voice from my past, a voice that I thought I had left behind forever. Slowly, tentatively, I turned to face the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, standing in the doorway, bathed in the pale moonlight, was a figure from my darkest nightmares. It was her, my mother, but it couldn't be. She was dead, buried 6 feet under, her memory nothing but a painful reminder of a past I had tried so desperately to forget. And yet, there she stood, her eyes cold and empty, a twisted smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Surprised to see me, my dear?" she cooed, taking a step closer. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to escape from this waking nightmare. But my body refused to obey, frozen in place by a terror unlike anything I had ever known. With each step she took, the darkness seemed to swirl around her, enveloping her in a cloak of shadows that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone, leaving me alone in the suffocating darkness. I wanted to believe that it was just a trick of the mind, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. But deep down, I knew the truth. The shadows within were real, and they hungered for my soul. I never imagined a night alone could turn into a nightmare. It was supposed to be a typical Friday evening, just me in my cozy apartment, indulging in some Netflix binge-watching. But little did I know, something sinister was lurking in the shadows, waiting to unravel a terrifying chain of events. As the clock struck midnight, I decided to call it a night and head to bed. But as I lay there, drifting into a light slumber, I heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from the direction of the living room. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen, hoping it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the scratching persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. With a trembling hand, I reached for my phone, ready to call the police. But just as I was about to dial, the scratching abruptly stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Was it safe to investigate? Or should I stay hidden in my room, hoping whatever was out there would go away? Curiosity got the better of me, and I mustered up the courage to tiptoe towards the living room, my heart pounding in my ears with every step. As I reached the doorway, I flicked on the light switch, illuminating the room in a soft glow. What I saw next sent shivers down my spine. A dark figure crouched by the window, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. I froze, unable to move as fear gripped me in its icy embrace. Who was this intruder, and what did they want with me? I contemplated making a run for it, but the thought of confronting the intruder head-on filled me with dread. Just as I was about to retreat back to my room, the figure turned towards me, its features twisted into a grotesque grin. My blood ran cold as I realized the chilling truth. The intruder wasn't human. It was something else entirely. Something otherworldly and malevolent. I stumbled backwards, my mind racing with fear and disbelief. How was this possible? Was I hallucinating? Or had I stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined? Desperate for answers, I fled to my room, barricading the door behind me as I tried to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around me. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize what was happening, there was no escaping the undeniable truth. I was not alone in my apartment, and whatever was out there was determined to find me. Hours passed in agonizing silence as I huddled in my room, my senses on high alert for any sign of movement. But just as I began to believe that the worst was over, a sound echoed through the apartment. A soft, melodic humming that sent chills down my spine. I listened in horror as the humming grew louder and more intense, filling the air with an otherworldly presence that seemed to seep into every corner of the room. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the humming stopped, leaving behind an eerie silence that was almost deafening in its intensity. I knew then that I had to confront whatever was out there, to face my fears head-on and put an end to this nightmare once and for all. With trembling hands, I reached for the door handle, steeling myself for whatever lay beyond. As I stepped out into the living room, I was met with a sight that chilled me to the core. The dark figure from before stood before me, its eyes burning with an unholy light as it loomed over me like a specter of death. But instead of lashing out, the figure simply stared at me, its expression unreadable. And then, to my astonishment, it spoke, a voice soft and melodious, yet filled with a profound sadness that sent shivers down my spine. "Do not be afraid," it said, its voice echoing through the empty room. I mean you no harm." I stood frozen in place, unsure of how to respond. Who, or what, was this creature? And what did it want from me? As if sensing my confusion, the figure spoke again, its voice gentle, yet filled with an unspoken urgency. "I have come to warn you," it said. "There are forces at work here far beyond your understanding, forces that seek to do you harm. But you are not alone in this struggle. There are those who would stand by your side, if only you would let them." With those cryptic words, the figure began to fade from view, its form dissipating like smoke in the wind. And as I stood there, alone in the darkness, I knew that my life would never be the same again. For in that moment, I had glimpsed the true nature of the world, a world where darkness and light waged an eternal war for the souls of mankind, a world where even the most ordinary of nights could hide unspeakable horrors beneath its surface. But as terrifying as that realization was, it also filled me with a newfound sense of purpose, a determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead and emerge victorious, no matter the cost. And so, with a steely resolve, I set out to confront the darkness that lurked in the shadows, knowing that the fate of not just myself, but all of humanity, hung in the balance. For in the end, it is not the darkness that defines us, but the light that we choose to shine in the face of adversity. And though the road ahead may be long and fraught with peril, I will not falter. For I am not alone. And together, we will face whatever horrors the night may bring, and emerge stronger on the other side. As the night enveloped the old house, I found myself alone, a chill creeping into my bones despite the crackling fire in the hearth. My parents had left for a weekend getaway, leaving me, a teenager, in charge. At first, I relished the idea of having the house to myself, but now, as the shadows danced across the walls, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I busied myself with mundane tasks, trying to push away the growing sense of dread. But as the hours passed, the house seemed to come alive with strange creaks and whispers. Each noise sent a shiver down my spine, and I found myself jumping at the slightest sound. Deciding to distract myself, I headed upstairs to my room, the only sanctuary in this looming mansion. As I climbed the stairs, a draft of cold air brushed against my skin, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Entering my room, I closed the door behind me, hoping to shut out the eerie atmosphere of the house. But even here, I couldn't find solace. The darkness pressed in on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. I tried to brush off my unease, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild. But then, I heard it, a soft scratching coming from above. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the source of the sound, the attic. For a moment I hesitated, debating whether to investigate or to stay safely locked in my room. But curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself creeping up the narrow staircase to the attic. The air grew colder with each step, and the scratching grew louder, echoing through the empty space. With trembling hands, I pushed open the attic door and stepped into the darkness beyond. At first, I saw nothing but dust and cobwebs, the faint light from my phone casting long shadows across the room. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shape lurking in the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the figure, barely visible in the dim light. It seemed to sway and shift, as if it were made of smoke and shadow. Terror washed over me as I realized that whatever it was not human. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear my eyes away from the creature before me. And then, slowly, it began to move towards me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as I fumbled for the attic door behind me. But before I could escape, I felt something cold and clammy wrap around my ankle, pulling me to the ground. I screamed as I felt myself being dragged into the darkness, the creature's grip tightening with each passing second. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature was gone, leaving me alone in the empty attic. Shaking with fear, I stumbled to my feet and raced back downstairs, determined to get out of this accursed house. But as I reached the front door, I realized with horror that it was locked from the outside. Panic rising in my chest, I frantically searched for a way out. But every window and door was securely shut. Trapped. Alone. With whatever lurked in the shadows of this house. And then, just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard it. A soft whispering coming from behind me. I turned, my heart in my throat, to see the figure standing in the doorway, its eyes gleaming with malice. With nowhere left to run, I braced myself for whatever horror awaited me in the darkness. But as the figure drew closer, its form began to waver, as if it were fading away before my eyes. And then, with a final whisper, it was gone, leaving me alone in the silence of the night. As I stood there, shaking and alone, I realized the true horror of this house. It wasn't haunted by ghosts or demons, but by the darkness that lurked within us all.